Hello and welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm going to be giving my on-second thoughts on Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. So, in case you don't know, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 is the 7th movie in the series. It's the first half based off of the last Harry Potter book. It's directed by David Yates, and of course has Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, and Emma Watson all returning in their roles, along with Ralph Fiennes, Alan Rickman, and all these other iconic characters and actors that have been throughout this series. And this one, I think, divided a lot of people because essentially the book was laid out in two sections, not exactly down the middle, but you have the first section that's a little bit more boring. It's a lot of setup, and then the second section is the climax that has all of the action. It has all of the plot points all coming together and culminating in this ending that's kind of iconic. That's debatable if it's iconic or not, but regardless, that's how some people view it. And so the first half, if you take just that first half and turn it into a movie, a lot of people consider that boring because it's just hunting for the Horcruxes. It's a lot of hiding in the woods. It's a lot of sitting around and talking. When I saw this back in 2010, I went with a friend, and I remember him saying that he needed to pee, and I'm like, well, now's the time because nothing's going to be happening for the next 20 minutes in this movie. And he went and came back, and he had missed nothing. So a lot of people find that more boring. This movie is a lot more setup, but for me, as a viewer, I thought that this movie was actually really good, and I enjoyed it more than the second half, I'm going to be honest. I actually enjoyed this one more because it felt the most different. It felt the most unique. It didn't feel like the traditional Harry Potter movies that we've been getting for the past few. It felt like something else entirely, where it's almost like espionage. It's almost, I don't know how to describe the feel of this movie exactly, but it was so different and so creative. I enjoyed it because I enjoyed this whole hiding out. I enjoyed the pacing difference. I enjoyed a lot about this movie, even though a lot of people would consider it boring. I didn't. So if you like to watch this for the character development, you like the slow burn kind of movies, this is one of actually my favorite ones in the series. I like it at least just as much as the first and second one, not as much as the third or fourth one, but it's in that mix for like that whole big tie for third place. It's not nearly as bad as the fifth one, and I like it better than the sixth one, honestly. There's a lot to like about it, but I can also understand why so many people would be bored by it. And there's still all the same problems in it that the other ones directed by David Yates have, where the tone of it's just confusing, where there's supposed to be these awkward pauses, like the scene where they go to visit Luna and then she's not there, so they're like waiting for her and waiting with her dad, who's a little bit off, but so is Luna, so they don't know if that's creepy off or just off because Luna's weird. And there's this waiting, and it's supposed to be awkward, and it's supposed to be kind of funny at times. But everything in this movie, up until this point, everything directed by this director in this series has been awkward. So how am I supposed to know if this is different awkward? How am I supposed to know if this is funny? How am I supposed to know if it's not funny at all and it's actually creepy? How am I supposed to know if it's just normal? I don't know. And that can get confusing, but in that one case, it's actually a little bit beneficial because it lulls you into that situation where you don't know if it's going to turn creepy unless you've already read the book. So it's interesting because it's almost like it stumbled into doing something clever that it didn't intentionally mean to do. So that's a plus, I guess. And I would say another plus of this story being cut in half is, as far as the book goes, I thought the first half of the book was much better than the second half as well, where I felt like J.K. Rowling was trying too hard to have an adult ending to the story. So she had to have all of these things happen. She had to have characters die. She had to have impact happen. And it felt very forced. Like these things didn't need to happen in order for her to be taken seriously. She was just doing it to be the big adult author who had a big adult ending to her big adult series. And so it's like characters dying really just felt out of place, and the way that they did it felt out of place. And this one obviously didn't have that. So I should probably, you know what, I'll talk about both of them. Scrap that intro. I'm sorry. Hello, welcome back to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today I'm going to be giving my on second thought on Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2. It's frustrating how in the second half, you've got all of these characters dying off screen, and it's supposed to just be like, oh, this is war, and it's true, but that didn't feel necessary. It felt out of place, and it just didn't feel right to me, at least reading it as a kid or watching it again as, I guess, still a kid. It just didn't work for me. So the first half I actually like a lot better because I found that to be a lot more fun. I found it to be a lot more interesting and different and unique for this series. I think David Yates was getting better as a director as this went on. He was starting to find his niche a little bit better. I don't know if Daniel Radcliffe or any of these other kid actors were trying more now that they knew that it was the finale or what, but I feel like everybody kind of got together and got a little bit better for these last two. And I don't know if that's just them gaining experience or if that's them knowing that it matters more. I don't know what made this one feel better or flow better than the other ones. I don't know, but they just did a little bit. It's not like it's all of a sudden David Yates is a great director. He didn't all of a sudden become as good as Alfonso Cuarón or even as good as Chris Columbus or anything like that, but he became capable. He became a capable director by the end of this, I felt. It wasn't nearly as awkward or as bad as the other two ones he had done, but these two still do have their flaws that are very noticeable. If you've been watching David Yates so far, you know he's got these flaws and you can pick them out and point them out in these as well. So I don't want to criticize the second part too much because it is the book coming through that I'm criticizing, because I don't like this story. I think that it was, a little force-fed. I think that it was a little too overly serious and solemn, just to try to appear serious and adult and all of those things. So when the movie does that, I can't really blame the movie as much as I blame J.K. Rowling, because I didn't like that. And I don't know if that makes me not a real Harry Potter fan or whatever. That's just how I feel about it. I didn't enjoy that turn in the story. I didn't enjoy that take on the story. The movie does have faults, but the story can't be the fault of the movie. I will also say that this movie had to make up for a lot of faults by the previous movies, where certain things became important, like Dobby the house elf. He was supposed to be a relatively important character from the second one on through this one. So when the movies cut him out of all the ones in between, and he just randomly appears again in the seventh one, you're like, cool. It's almost like a callback, or it's almost like a reference. It doesn't feel like a real character anymore. It's like when you watch the new Star Wars movies and everything is a reference to a previous Star Wars film. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like a new character. It doesn't feel like anything like that. It just feels like a callback. So it feels manipulative. So when you've got Dobby come back in this one simply to die, it doesn't have the same kind of emotional impact that it would have or did have in the books, where this is a character consistently through this story. When he just pops back up for no reason, you're like, okay, so he has to be here for a reason. And then when he dies, you're like, okay, that was the reason. And you don't feel like you were told a real story. You feel like you were trying to be manipulated there. And so I don't appreciate that. I don't enjoy how that character was used. But it's not really necessarily David Yates' fault, because that was the choice of the other directors as well, to just completely cut him out, especially in the fourth one, where he had an important role. And you could say, yeah, he was supposed to have an important role in the fifth one and sixth one too, and that was still David Yates' choice. So yeah, it's everybody's fault. They should have kept him in this whole time, but it's hard to know what's important and what you can cut out and what you can't. So this movie got stuck because of the mistakes of the past. So that's not necessarily its fault, but it still is a shame for it. As far as Harry Potter movies go, if this wasn't the finale, I wouldn't care about them. Honestly, I wouldn't put them on any kind of pedestal, but because it's the end of the story, I feel like a lot more people care about these two. But if this one was the fifth one or the sixth one, they're about the same quality level, a little bit better than the fifth one, but people would still have the same reaction, where I don't know anybody that talks about the fifth one like it's great. I don't know anybody that talks about the sixth one like it's great, but people hold on to these last two because they're supposed to matter, because it is the finale, and so people think that they have to care more about them, when in reality there's not a whole lot there to make them any more special than the other ones. It's just the fact that it's the end of the story, and we got to see them win. We got to see them grow up, and we got to see the old versions of them, which was fun, I guess. And especially, a lot of people I hear defend the 8th one more than the 7th one, where, like I just said, I feel like the 7th one was a much better made movie. Now, the plot was boring, but that's not the movie's fault. That's just the book. That's just the story. And the 8th one, yeah, there's more happening, but I found myself not caring as much about it because I didn't feel like it was as well executed. Like, even just simple things. Like, it comes down to, like, understanding and adapting the story well, like a fan would. And David Yates, I've said it enough times, but I'll say it again, I feel like he didn't know what he was doing. I don't think he had any emotional attachment to this story. I don't think he cared. He was just making movies. And so when you see the way that he portrays the death of Voldemort, you know that he doesn't quite get it, because he gives him this big, epic, almost emotional ending, and the whole point in the book was that he was supposed to just get hit and fall over dead, and it was supposed to be anticlimactic. That was the whole point, was it was supposed to be so sudden and so anticlimactic that you were just like, well, that's it? Because they were trying to humanize this character. They were trying to show that he was not unbeatable. They were trying to show that he was not some sort of deity. He was just another human, and when you ended him, you ended it, and that was the end. So it's a shame that you couldn't have shown that. Well, no, they could have shown it. They just didn't. They had his like skin peel away and him turn to dust like he just got snapped by Thanos, and it's like, come on, what is that? It's so over dramatic, whereas this was supposed to be the opposite of that. So it's a shame that I feel like David Yates really didn't care about the story or understand the story or something, because there's so much that he did in the series that just doesn't feel right. These both are okay, but I really do like the first one more because I felt like there was less to do with it, but they did it better, if that makes sense. The second one and the last one and the finale, it had more to live up to. And they didn't have the help of the backing story, but you could have fixed some things, but instead of fixing some things, you actually made it worse. And I know that if you fix some things, the fans would get mad because you're changing it, you're making it different than the real story, but sometimes that's just what you gotta do. Sometimes if you do it well enough, people won't care. Now I get it, that's the minority, that's like the Jurassic Park thing, where Jurassic Park changed everything, but it was just as good, so people didn't care, and I guess not as many people read the book anyway, but regardless, if you know a way to do it better, then you should. And I know that doesn't always work out. It's like a series of unfortunate events. That was better than the books, but everybody hated that for some reason, I guess. This series peaked in the middle with the 3rd and the 4th one, and then it really took a downturn with the 5th one and started to build itself back up, climb itself back up to respectability, but it still was not worthy of that 3rd and 4th one. So this series is a shame, and there's a lot of things that went into this series to ruin it the way it did. Part of it being the director choice being god-awful, part of it being Daniel Radcliffe's alcoholism and all of that, and part of it just being, I feel like everybody involved with it was kind of done by the halfway point. They're like, alright, we've done a lot of these movies, can we just get on with it? It felt like the last leg of a marathon where you're not sprinting, you're just trying to get there. I don't know. There's a lot of things that could have been better about this series, and David Yates is one of them, because he really did not carry his weight. He went from being an awful director to an okay director within the series, so props to him. Maybe he's continued to get even better after that. I don't know. But regardless, he kind of killed this series. I don't know if it's mostly his fault, only partially his fault, or whatever, but he is responsible for killing this series, at least in part. So yeah, that's kind of my view on the whole series. If I had to rank them, I would probably go Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, Chamber of Secrets, Sorcerer's Stone, Deathly Hallows Part 1, Half-Blood Prince, Hollows Part 2, Order of the Phoenix. That's probably how I would do it. I might change that a little bit, but that's essentially how I view the series. It's hard to talk about one without talking about the other, because they're both incomplete stories. It's literally the climax of one movie was stretched out into a whole movie. It's like if in Avengers they took the end battle scene in New York and and made that into a part 2, whereas the whole movie, it doesn't really work and it was unnecessary. It was a very obvious ploy by Hollywood to try to make more money out of it. You really didn't need to do that. You could have cut stuff out of part 1, and you could have cut stuff out of part 2 and squished them together, maybe even make like a 2.5 hour, 3 hour movie out of it, and it would have been fine. I don't think anybody would have complained. The pacing in the rest of the movies is already a bit janky because they're adaptations from books. I get it. You're trying to make them shorter, but it's not like the 7th book was the longest book or anything. I think it was the 3rd longest. It's not like this one had to be this long of a movie or anything. So yeah, this was Hollywood messing with stuff, and that always goes well, as we know. And it kind of dictated how a lot of these things went, where it's like, we got a Hunger Games Part 1 and 2, and we got like a Twilight Part 1 and 2, and everybody was copying this, and it was a horrible trend happening. And I'm glad that, I think for the most part, is kind of done. I think that's run its course and is away, but this one is really part of why, if not the main reason why, this whole trend started, and it was horrible. It's hard to talk about one movie without talking about the other because they should have just been the same movie. There was no reason to separate it. It was unnecessary and unnatural, and maybe one day I'll edit together a super cut of it where I just put them together and cut out all the baloney. So, yeah, that's what I thought. Let me know in the comments below what you guys thought, and let me know what series or movies I should do next, because I need to do something new now. I've finished Harry Potter, so it's time to move on to something else. What should it be? Let me know in the comments below, and of course, don't forget to like, share, and if you're new here, subscribe. Thanks, guys. Bye.